Good Shabbos, my holy brothers and sisters. Shabbat will be here in not too many hours, about 5 hours. It's just after noon here in LA on a Friday. Who's in the house? Where are you tuning in from? We always give a little time at the beginning of the show for the people watching live to find it in their news feeds. And of course, am I in the right place? I hope I am. and of course, when you share, when you comment, when you hit that like and love button, it helps signal to Facebook that we're doing something of value. Who's in the house? Where are people tuning in from? We've got a terrific daf today. I'm just a little concerned. Just want to check something here while we're waiting. Be right with you. And I should disconnect the phone. Okay. Things are coming in now. Okay. Is everything all right? Yes.
What did you do?
Do what? I don't understand. You have to tell me what's going on.
I've been waiting to share it to the forum.
Go ahead.
What were you just doing, though? You weren't.
I was just checking to make sure everything is okay. I didn't share it. Okay. Elizabeth. She says, Shabbat Shalom from Indiana. Timothy Bryant from Central Arizona. Paul Papuzinski from Louisiana. Welcome, my holy brothers and sisters. Kim Greenaway says, Shalom from London. All right. It's good to be with you, folks. It's just so great. Fridays are tough, you know. There's such a big rush today. I was over at Ralph's. The Ralph's near us is the big supermarket chain. We're very blessed. We live in a very Jewish neighborhood, and so it has a big kosher section. And always, you know, Friday last-minute shopping and the men buying flowers for their wives, as well as just the last-minute cooking needs. It's raucous. Friday at the supermarket is always raucous. James Roth in the house, Andrew Vasquez from Gainesville, Georgia, Pamela from the Catskills. Great to have you here with us, my holy brothers and sisters. We are in Tractate Berachos. We are hitting just a great set of learnings and teachings here. We've just entered chapter 4, and we're looking at the origins and requirements of Shmona Esrei, the 18 blessings, the centerpiece of the morning, afternoon, and evening prayers that are obligated for all Jewish men. And you know, we started just as when we were studying the Shema in the opening chapters of this volume. We were looking at the times when we can say these prayers and some of the limitations. And yesterday we were discussing this idea that the evening prayer, that there was a dispute. Do the prayers correspond to the prayers initiated morning, afternoon, and evening by our patriarchs? Or does this prayer, the Shmona Esrei, correspond more closely to the offerings that were given in the temple when it stood? And our sages conclude that now this institutionalized daily prayer, along with a formula, is more similar to the communal obligations of the nation, which were fulfilled by the offerings that were given in the prayer, the daily offerings that were given in the temple, morning and afternoon. There was no evening offering, so what about the evening prayer? It seems to be descended, originated by our patriarchs, but now if the prayers are going to more closely be tied to the communal obligations in the temple, if there was no evening offering in the temple, do we have to do this evening prayer? In other words, is it obligatory or optional? And yesterday we had a dispute between Rabbi Yehoshua, who said it was optional, and Rabban Gamliel, the Nasi, the head of the academy, the head of our sages were stationed in Yavne after the temple fell in Jerusalem. And Gamliel said the evening prayer is obligatory. That's what we say, that's what the sages say, that's what I say, I, Rabban Gamliel, the head of the academy. And because, Sir Rabbi Yehoshua kept following his own reasoning and his own ruling in contradiction to the ruling of the head of the academy, Rabban Gamliel sort of disciplined him publicly and even humiliated him a little bit because he seemed to persist in contradicting Rabban Gamliel. And because he humiliated him publicly to sort of teach the lesson, the other sages didn't like it, and as it were, impeached Rabban Gamliel and replaced him with the much younger sage, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. That's where we left off the story yesterday. On today's daf, page 28, the story continues. So when Elazar ben Azariah took over, so remember that he was a much younger guy. He was only 18 years old. He was a great, great sage, great in wisdom, great in lineage, a 10th generation descendant of Ezra the scribe, who led the nation when we returned from the Babylonian exile and reestablished the second temple. So 10 generations later, Elazar ben Azariah is his descendant. And Ezra and Elazar, 10 generations later, were both Kohanim, priests. Right? So these were the priestly class. So Elazar really had everything going for him, except that he was so young. We learned yesterday that a miracle was performed for him, and his hair turned white, so that people would perceive him as older and wiser, and also a little bit the anointed of heaven, that it was good to choose him. So once he took over as head of the academy changed. New leadership, new rules, a new broom sweeps clean, as it were. And one of the big rules that changed at the Academy of the Sages was that under Rabban Gamliel's leadership, they were very choosy about who was allowed to come in and study there. Very choosy. And Rabban Gamliel was looking for people whose deeds reflected their learning, that they should be the same type of person inside and out. That's very nice. That's really, that would be a good requirement, I think, for any kind of leadership, any kind of clergy. Whenever you're looking for people to work for you, whenever you're in a hiring process, as we are right now at Accidental Talmudist, you're looking for people, who are very consistent inside and out. And when you're talking about sages in training, so these would be people who seek to learn much Torah, in their minds, but also act out the Torah that they're learning. However, Rabban Gamliel's requirements for these people were so high that a lot of people just didn't make the cut. Even though they wanted to learn Torah, they came to the academy, they wanted to study there, but somehow they couldn't pass his interview process. Now that Elazar ben Azariah is the head of the academy, the new rule is, well, anybody who wants to learn Torah, if you want it bad enough that you've come here to the site of this academy and you're willing to learn all day and sit on the uncomfortable benches and not eat very good food, but just to learn at the feet of the sages, as it were. If desire is enough, if that's what you want to do, you're in. So they taught that when Elazar ben Azariah took over, they added 400 benches, right? So the sages sit on benches. Unclear how many people one bench holds. Might be one, might be 5, might be 10. So a lot of new people were admitted into the academy, 400 benches worth, and some say 700 benches worth. A lot more people made it in. When Rabban Gamliel saw how many new students were allowed into the academy once he was, removed as the leader, he actually regretted and thought to himself, maybe I was wrong all along. He's very humble, right? He wasn't just filled with bitterness that he had been removed from office. He actually asked himself, maybe I did the wrong thing. I wasn't letting people in and they wanted to learn Torah. Look how many people are showing up here now to learn Torah. perhaps my policy was, removing the possibility for people to study Torah who wanted to study Torah, and I was wrong. I was wrong, he thinks to himself. That night, he has a dream. So, when somebody at this level is having a dream, it's not just a dream, it's a communication from heaven. And he sees in his dream sort of white jugs filled with ash. And the meaning of that dream is that these new students who are being let in, their motivation is not good. They're coming to show off, to be part of this community, not because they really want to learn Torah with all their hearts, and they're going to live that Torah and then go out into Israel and be leaders and sages, like what Gamliel was trying to create with this academy. And then he didn't feel quite as bad. And some say that the dream was shown to him not because these people lacked motivation and lacked positive personal characteristics, but rather just to make Gamliel not feel so bad, because he was quite beloved of heaven. He's a person who really dedicated his whole life to learning and teaching Torah and disseminating that Torah throughout Israel. Even if he was wrong about certain things, he just dedicated his whole life to the Jewish people at that time, and he was given great merit for that in heaven. Nonetheless, he doesn't, even though he resents that he was removed and he's willing to doubt himself, he doesn't remove himself from the study hall. He's no longer the leader, but now he just comes as a student and as a sage, as a fellow sage, to learn with his colleagues. You can imagine, somebody a professor perhaps at a university who's elevated to president of the university, and then all the other professors removed him. Maybe he wouldn't want to attend the colloquies, where all the other professors are discussing and learning with each other, because he might be emotional and filled with resentment. But Rabban Gamliel wasn't like that. He went into the study hall to learn. And while he's now learning, along with all the other sages, no longer as their leader, a question comes up in the academy from a convert, right? Or a prospective convert. And it's somebody who originates in either Moab or Ammon, right? So these nations, at the time that the children of Israel left Egypt and ended up coming into Israel, into the land of Israel, the Moabites and the Ammonites really made things difficult for the children of Israel. They were enemies of the children of Israel, and to such a degree that the law came down in the Torah that the descendants of Moab and Ammon will not be allowed to convert into to join the Jewish people as proselytes. They would not be allowed to convert to Judaism. Only them. People from every other nation on earth, of course, are allowed to convert to Judaism. There's challenges. It's difficult because when you convert to Judaism, previously you only had 7 commandments that you were obligated to fulfill. And once you complete your conversion, you have 613 obligations that you need to fulfill. That's why there's the old custom that when people go to a rabbi and say, I want to become a Jew, the rabbi says, yeah, no, it's really not for you. Once, twice, and if he comes back a third time, then the teaching can begin. And it's really for the benefit of the prospective convert. At any rate, back then in the academy, this one guy came, and he had been discouraged, but now he was really serious about coming. But the problem was he was a descendant, or he was from, I forget which it is, Moab or Ammon. So he said, can I join the children of Israel? And Rabban Gamliel said, well, no, you can't. Even though it's many generations since that event happened, it says in the Torah that descendants of those places can't come in. Rabbi Yehoshua, right, who had originally had disagreements with Gamliel, and led to that big dispute that resulted in Gamliel being removed, Rabbi Yehoshua said, yes, you can. Why? Because the people who live in Moab or in Ammon now are not the same peoples who lived there at the time that the ban on those people entering the Jewish people was given in the Torah. The populations of the Middle East had been shifted many times, but especially there had been a king, Sancherib, who was like a mighty ruler, not Jewish. I forget what country he was involved in. Maybe it was Babylonia. Maybe it was, I think it was Assyria, the northern kingdom. And he had enough power that to sort of consolidate his power, he sort of went throughout the empire and moved people from one place in the empire to another. We saw Joseph doing the same thing on behalf of Pharaoh in Egypt, moving people around from one part of the empire to another as a way to assert authority and control over the people. And so that happened in Moab and Ammon. The original Moabites and Ammonites had been moved. Whoever was resettled in that land was not the people who were banned by the Torah from joining the Jewish people. And so this guy should be allowed to come in. And even though Rabban Gamliel said, but wait a minute, the Torah also says, the Bible also says that eventually people will return to their lands. So even though the people had been, the populations had been shifted, maybe the people who are there now are the original Moabites and Ammonites. And basically what Yehoshua showed is that we can't know that for sure. We don't know really who is there, and we're not going to prohibit them from coming in and joining the Jewish people if they're sincere in making that conversion. And Rabbi Yehoshua's view was accepted by the other sages. When Rabban Gamliel saw that Rabbi Yehoshua's views weren't just contradictory to his own, but were in fact being accepted by the other sages as good and valid views, he thought to himself, I was wrong. I was wrong. The way that I forced my will on Rabbi Yehoshua and sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Just put him down and said that he's wrong and he can't contradict what we're saying at the academy, and he can't contradict the head of the academy when Gamliel was the head of the academy. Gamliel says, I was wrong. I was wrong. And so he goes to Yehoshua and apologizes. And he said, I was wrong. And I was wrong to impose my will over yours and impose my views over yours. And will you forgive me? And Yehoshua said, no. He had really been humiliated by Gamliel, and he would not forgive him. And Gamliel said, in deference to my father, will you forgive me? So Gamliel's father was named Shimon ben Gamliel, Shimon the son of Gamliel. So from that we learn that Gamliel's grandfather was an earlier Gamliel. But his father, Shimon ben Gamliel, was a great leader in Israel that Rabbi Yehoshua knew personally. And Yehoshua said, you know what, I understand. You're just trying to transmit the values of your father and do what you need to do for the Jewish people, and I will forgive you. And so now Rabban Gamliel and Rabbi Yehoshua had made up, as it were. The conflict between them was over. And it was that conflict which led to Rabban Gamliel being ousted as leader of the academy. Since that conflict no longer existed, perhaps he should get his position back as head of the academy. Yehoshua said, yes, he should get his position back as head of the academy, because even though Elazar is wise and rich and a descendant of Ezra and a Cohen, and a miracle was performed by him, said he should have white hair, still Elazar ben Azariah is only 18 years old. We should have a more experienced leader, and this is the one who's led us through many tough times, and even if I didn't agree with all his decisions, he deserves to remain the leader. So they sent a message back to the sages in the academy that the conflict between them, between Gamliel and Yehoshua, was over, and now they could restore Gamliel to the head position. At first, they didn't believe the messenger. They thought it couldn't be true that Yehoshua had been appeased. They realized that it was true. Yehoshua had been appeased. And Akiva and the other sages said, look, we only ousted Gamliel because he harmed your honor. He diminished your honor. If you are satisfied that you are appeased and your honor is restored, then we'd be very happy to restore Gamliel to his position as the head of the academy. Problem. In the meantime, we elevated Elazar ben Azariah to be the head of the academy. And in matters of holiness, we ascend, we do not descend. Meaning, once you consecrated something to become holy in some way, you can't remove that holiness. This is actually why, it's a teaching for another day, but this is why we increase the number of candles that we light each night on Hanukkah. We go from 1 to 8 each night, more candles, and that's a teaching we'll encounter when we get to Tractate Shabbos in some months. But in matters of holiness, we ascend. And since we elevated Elazar ben Azariah, added to his holiness by making him head of the academy, we can't now diminish him and bring him down. Of course, they did that to Gamliel, didn't they? But Elazar didn't do anything wrong that he should be removed. They just wanted to restore Gamliel to the position that he had before. They worked out a compromise that Gamliel and Elazar would share the leadership of the academy, basically teaching, one would teach one week, the other would teach the other week, and particularly who would give the sermon on Shabbat. And so they would alternate, but they felt that if they alternated 1 and 1, this week Gamliel, next week Elazar, the following week Gamliel, the week after that Elazar, 1 and 1, that they would end up getting jealous of each other. They couldn't share it equally. One of them would have to be senior to the other. Even if they're both heads of the academy, there has to be, like a top head and a slightly lesser head. And of course, Gamliel was older, much older and more experienced, and he should be senior. They thought to do it 2 weeks Gamliel, 1 week Elazar. And it was Elazar who said that, no, the ratio should be 3 to 1. Every month, basically 4 weeks, lunar month. So 3 weeks, Gamliel is in charge. 1 week, Elazar is in charge. And that is the compromise they worked out moving forward. And that's how this story ends. The final detail of the story is, remember, the original conflict, the original question that came up in which they disagreed with each other was, is the evening prayer obligatory or optional? Gamliel had said it's obligatory. We do follow Gamliel. It is obligatory. And the last detail that the Talmud offers about that story is, who was it that asked that question? And the student that asked the question was the young Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. Shimon ben Yochai asked the question. He will become a very prominent sage, and we're going to meet him a lot. And he's basically the founder of the Jewish mystical tradition. Eventually, the teachings of the Zohar would be attributed to Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. Ben Yochai, bar Yochai, both mean son of Yochai. Okay, that was the story, and that's how it ended regarding Gamliel and Yehoshua and the elevation of Elazar ben Azariah when Gamliel was removed from the head of the academy. The Talmud moves on. This page 28 is a busy page. In addition to finishing the story of these two great sages, we go on, and there's a new Mishnah which says that Rabbi Nechaniah would say a prayer when he entered the study hall and when he left the study hall. Now, when we go travel, like if you go on a trip, anywhere out of your city, there's something called the traveler's prayer, the wayfarer's prayer. And that prayer says, basically there's all kinds of dangers in the world. Please, God, keep us safe from harm while we're traveling, and give us grace in the eyes of all who meet us, etc. That kind. Moti Kess is watching us. He says, "Awesome hat, Sal." Thank you, Moti. This hat is Magen Am, Shield of the Nation. And that is a security force that we have here where we live to protect small synagogues from harm. God forbid we should ever be needed, but we want to be ready. So anyway, we say a wayfarer's prayer when we think that we're going on the road, especially in the old ancient times. To be on the road was to be in danger. So this Rabbi Nechaniah, who's saying a prayer as he enters and leaves the study hall, feels a little bit like that traveler's prayer, but they said to him, why do you need to pray as you enter and leave the study hall? It seems like you're praying for your safety, but the study hall is not such a dangerous place. And so they said, what is your prayer? And then he told them, and this text, which is now in the Gemara, so the commentary on this Mishnah, the Mishnah is he prayed as he entered and left the study hall, and the Gemara is the text of that prayer, and you will find it. So this is the Art Scroll Talmud, right? This is when I did Daf Yomi the first time. I used the Art Scroll all the way through. Very fond of it. Fantastic quantity of notes and commentaries on every page of the Talmud. And this time through, I've been using the Koren Talmud. Right? So it's a little different. And usually you see it with the covers on it that are up on my shelf over there. But one thing that the Koren does not have, and which the Art Scroll does have, is that on the inside cover of every volume of the Talmud is this prayer that we're now encountering that Rabbi Nechanya would say as he entered the study hall, and a prayer as he left the study hall. And I just want to read that prayer to you. So he would say, I don't believe this. Okay, I just happened to grab one off the shelf because it's on the inside cover of every single volume. For some reason, the one I grabbed today has that text in French. Okay, so I'm just going to read it out of the Koren so I don't have to run back in the house. I just like the way it was done in English. But basically, the text is... Hold on one second. Oh, here it is. So Rabbi Nechanya ben Hakana, he would say, as he entered the study hall, may it be your will, Lord my God, that no mishap in determining the halacha transpires that is caused by me, and that I not fail in any matter of halacha, and that my colleagues not rejoice over me when I stumble and fail, and that I will neither declare that something is pure, that I will not say that something is pure which is actually impure, and I will not say that something is impure which is actually pure. And that my colleagues will not, and that my colleagues won't make a mistake in a matter of law, and I will not rejoice over them if they should make a mistake. And upon his exit, what would he say? He said, I give thanks before you, Lord my God, that you have placed my lot among those who sit in the study hall, and that you have not given me my portion among those who sit idly on street corners. I rise early and they rise early. I rise early to pursue matters of Torah, and they rise early to pursue frivolous matters. I toil and they toil. I toil and receive reward, and they toil and do not receive reward. I run and they run. I run to the life of the world to come, and they run to the pit of destruction. Right? So it's a beautiful prayer. And when we were at the Siyum Hashas, when this Talmud study cycle began, the 7.5-year cycle began at a huge celebration of finishing the previous one and starting the new one at the beginning of January. One of the rabbis who spoke there was teaching that this idea of we run and they run, or that they are idlers, right? The people who are not studying Torah are idlers. We should remember, the idea here with this, what Rabbi Nechanya is saying, is that people work very hard. Right? In this world, there are a lot of people who work very hard. They're not idlers, right? But if they don't recognize that the work that they do is part of is part of a bigger picture, right? And that when we work to earn money, if we're setting aside 10% of that money to benefit good causes, then God becomes our partner in the work that we do. If we think, okay, maybe not everybody can be a saint, right? Not everybody can be a doctor saving lives every day. Not everybody is going to be feeding people on food lines every day. Some people just have to do their job to feed their family. Nevertheless, if they remember that while they're working, whatever they're working at, it's part of a bigger picture, and they're fulfilling their function in society and enabling their family to eat and to live by good values. It's just this idea that if you may not have time for Torah study every day, though you should try to make time, but you want to infuse, your approach to life with holiness. And if you do that, then everything that you do is part of that holy mission. That's the idea here. The Talmud continues to give some teachings about advice for living. Now that we've heard this prayer from Rabbi Nechanya going into the study hall, and this is very beautiful. We have some teachings here. When Rabbi Eliezer fell ill, his students came to visit him. Like, ill means really ill, like he could die, right? And while they were visiting him, and he was afraid that he could die, and they said to him, teach us paths of life, guidelines by which to live, so that we will thereby merit the life of the world to come. And so he sort of summed up, how to live a good life by saying, be vigilant in the honor of your counterparts and prevent your children from logic when studying verses that tend toward heresy. Here he was talking a little bit about, in that time, this was already the Greeks had been around, we're now into the Roman period, and there had been people, who were great sages who were pulled away from, studying holy texts and divinity to, just be pulled to say, well, I can figure it all by myself. Humans can figure it out. We don't need the word of God. Logic is enough, right? And to this day, this is going to be the claim of atheists. Well, science can solve anything. If we have a question, we'll ask a scientist. Studying this superstitious scripture stuff is useless. And so he says you have to really be careful that as people are becoming learners, that they realize that there's a lot to be learned out there, and everything has its time and place. He wasn't against, he wasn't against subjects that help describe the world. He wasn't against science per se at all. But he just said you have to be careful as you get into secular subjects that you don't become a mocker or a scoffer, which can be one of the dangers of those studies. And how do you avoid that? By making sure that you continue to study among people who are great in wisdom, and what he meant was holy wisdom. And so you should encourage your children to learn between the knees of Torah scholars, and when you pray, know before whom you stand, right? Don't just pray a bunch of words. Realize that when you're praying, you're standing before God, before the Holy One, blessed be He, and acquire an attitude and a devotion in prayer that matches that situation. And if you do that, said Rabbi Eliezer, you will merit the life of the world to come. A similar teaching when Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai fell ill. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is the one who saved the whole Jewish enterprise. When the temple fell, he's the one who arranged for the sages to move to Yavne, to reestablish the academy there, and to start working out all of these teachings and what Judaism would look like in the post-temple period. When Yochanan ben Zakkai fell ill, his students entered to visit him, and he began to cry. They asked for teachings, and he began to cry. And they said, why are you crying? And what they meant by that is, no one is holier, more learned, more dedicated to the Jewish people than you are. No one wants to, everybody wants to keep living. Nobody is ready to die. No one should be. But, obviously you're not afraid to go to the next world because you're going to have such a beautiful portion in the world to come. Why are you crying? And he said, if they were leading me before a flesh and blood king whose life is temporary and who is here today and dead in the grave tomorrow, and if he is angry with me, his anger is not eternal. And if he incarcerates me, his incarceration is not an eternal incarceration. And if he kills me, his killing is not for an eternity, as there is life after any death that he might decree, he an earthly king. And I'm able to appease him with words and even bribe him with money. And even so, I would cry when standing before an earthly king for royal judgment. And now that they are leading me before the supreme King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be He, who lives and endures forever, and if he is angry with me, his anger is eternal. And if he incarcerates me, the incarceration is eternal. And if he kills me, the killing is for an eternity. And I am not able to appease him with words and bribe him with money. And I have two paths before me, one to paradise and another to Gehenna. And I do not know which they are leading me on. Will I not cry? And so think of the humility nobody would have a better claim to think, okay, I'm Yochanan ben Zakkai, dedicated my life to Torah learning, and that Torah learning should be preserved forever among the Jewish people. I should be confident that I'm going to have a good place in heaven. And he's not confident. He doesn't act confident. And he shouldn't act confident because he's teaching us that nobody should be confident in that, because no matter how much we've done, we have to keep working every day to be a mensch. And if we don't keep working, we can slip and fall. And even the greatest, holiest, saintliest people eventually can fall if they don't, keep awe of heaven, fear of heaven before them. And how do you cultivate fear of heaven? By being as humble as Yochanan ben Zakkai is here. But eventually they said to him, Rabbi, you're going to be okay. And he actually said, well, I might be dying now, so remove the vessels from my house. Like, now he gave a practical teaching so that if I die, there's going to be a dead body in the house, and then all these vessels are going to become impure and might not be capable of being purified. So get them out of the house so they don't, corpse tuma, corpse impurity doesn't attach to them. Very practical, thinking of them and teaching them. We've just had a big philosophical conversation. Now let's talk about something practical. And that's so Jewish, that, philosophy of the high and mighty and the big ideas of the world has to go hand in hand with very practical matters. But they said, please give us a blessing. Give us a blessing, Rabbi, before we turn to these practical matters. And the blessing that he gave them was, he said to them, may it be that the fear of heaven should be upon you like the fear of flesh and blood. And they said, that's it? That's the blessing? If you're, God forbid, you're leaving the world today, this is the blessing you're going to leave us with? Can you give us a better blessing than that we should fear heaven as much as we fear flesh and blood? Shouldn't we fear heaven much more than we fear flesh and blood? Isn't that what you just taught us? That your awe of heaven is so great, and that, if we think about coming before an earthly king, that one would be afraid, but now going before the heavenly king, you're trembling so much more. And what he said was, listen, let's be real. For most people, the idea of coming before an earthly authority, stepping in front of a king, a president, a prime minister, etc., that's so real and impressive to them that it makes them quake in their boots and they feel real awe. And when people think about God, it's such a, for most people, it's such an intellectual, abstract concept that they don't develop in their guts the same kind of awe and fear of God as they do of an earthly king. So he's saying to them, my blessing to you is that you should fear God as much as you fear earthly authority, because the fear of earthly authority is real to you. And the fear of God needs to be at least that real to you. And that was his blessing to the students who came and visited him. And then the last teaching that we had on this page concerns why it's 18 blessings. And we're going to continue with that tomorrow, God willing. And also a simple teaching that when we pray, we face the Holy Temple. So we in America, right, if we're going to face the Holy Temple in Israel, we face east. People who are praying in, India, Jews in India, and there are Jews in India, and when they pray, well, they would face west, right? Because that's toward the temple. So Jews are always facing the temple no matter where they are. If they're in Africa, they're going to be facing north, right? Or maybe kind of northeast. Wherever the temple is in relation to where they are, that's the way they face. And that's how synagogues are built, right? So that the congregation is primarily praying in the direction of the site of the Holy Temple in their daily prayers. Okay. That is our teaching for today. That was on Berachos 28 of Tractate, page 28 of Tractate Berachos. We've got Shabbat coming in just a few hours. I'll just stay on for a little longer to see if there's some questions in the comments. But I do think that our takeaway from the story, the second part of the story of Rabbi Gamliel, who was replaced by Elazar ben Azariah as head of the academy, and then because Gamliel had been a little bit too harsh on his colleague Rabbi Yehoshua, but I think the takeaway is to look at Gamliel's behavior when he was removed. Rather than simmer with resentment, he said, well, maybe it was my fault, and maybe I handled it wrong. And what can I learn from that experience? And in order to learn from that experience, even though he felt humiliated by being removed from his position of authority, he still remained in the community. He still went to learn with the other sages. He still, sought to learn from them what is the right way to live and the right way to run the academy, as it were. And he became a better leader for the experience, and then was able to share the leadership with the young Elazar ben Azariah. And Elazar learned from that humility and was himself ready to step aside and say, okay, we have to share it. I understand I can't be totally demoted because now that I've been elevated, but I'm giving you by far the primary position. We'll divide the duties 3-1. Your authority compared to mine is 3 times greater, is what Elazar said to Rabbi Gamliel. Okay, let me see if there are any questions here. Alan Goldstein Coven said, infuse your daily life with holiness. That is a nugget of spiritual truth that seems to me represents the essence of Judaism. Thank you for that, Reb Litvak. Thank you, Alan. Any other questions up here? I don't see one. If there's anybody asking one, put in the comments now. And Brian says the rabbi essentially blessed his students with the path to wisdom. Agreed. And that's what his work was all about, right? Not just teaching people knowledge that they need to know, but more importantly, and this is what the Talmud is all about, is teaching people how to learn, right? How to learn on their own. The most important lessons that any sage receives is how to figure out questions on their own, how to ask questions on their own. And that's why we always try to say to our kids at the end of a school day, did you ask a good question today, right? Because it's very interesting what they learned today, but the most important thing they learn each day is how to learn, right? How to learn. I bless you all, my holy brothers and sisters, that your curiosity grows every day, that you seek to grow in wisdom every day and to share the wisdom that you learn, and that wisdom should be practical, meaning it helps you be more of a mensch, more of somebody who's there for others, and then leading by example so that they want to become somebody who is there for others. All the best, sending you big love from LA. Take care and good Shabbos.